Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy 1st of July. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We are going to have yet another great conversation. Let's do it.
The American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just it's a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. It is the 1st of July, and we're going to have yet another one of our late night conversations. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notifications bell. The way these live stream conversations, the way this show generally works, is I give my opening remarks, and my opening remarks are then followed by a roll call where we find out who is watching on the other side of the camera, names and locations, which is always fun. We get to, see who the community is. And then after the roll call, and after the opening remarks, then I answer super chat questions for the rest of the night. So if there's something that you would like me to talk about in the second half of our program, by all means, send me a super chat. I will be writing it down. I will write down your super chat questions. I'll write them down. And then from there, I'll spend the second half of our program answering them. And if you want to get me talking, ask me a good question. Pitch me a softball and I'll hit a home run, or pitch me a fastball and watch me still hit a home run. I'm good at answering questions. Every so often, I just have to be honest. I don't know enough about it. But for the most part, I can answer your questions however need be done. I am more than happy to engage with all of you. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notifications bell. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Now, a couple quick announcements just before we get going here. The first announcement, really, they're two announcements, but they're both on the same day. So I already told you about this, right? Which is that coming up July 10th in New York City, we are having an event featuring the great disruptor, Jose Vega. You've probably seen many videos of Jose disrupting various speeches and, being, challenging people like AOC, challenging, the New York Times. He is always there to call out and hold the rich and powerful to accountable. Well, this time he won't be a disruptor. He will be on the panel. He'll be speaking at our event on July 10th in New York City. In addition to that, we've got the great Chris Halali, former congressional congressman, candidate in Vermont, law student, farmer from Vermont, Chris Halali, representing the American Student Union. In addition to that, we'll have the great Nick Brana of the People's Party. And on top of that, we're going to have some guest attorneys who will be coming to speak on the topic. It will be a great evening for all who are participating. Peter Coffin will be in the house. He will be there making a documentary of the whole thing. I'll be there. Other guests will be there. It's going to be awesome. So that'll be July 10th at 7 p.m. But that is not all. That is not all that will be happening on July 10th. In addition to that, beforehand in the afternoon on July 10th, we'll be having an anti-war protest. Monday, July 10th at 3 p.m. in New York City. We'll assemble at 43rd and 6th Avenue. There's kind of a park, concrete park in that area. And we'll be having a small rally, marching through the streets of New York City. Peace with Russia, peace with China, no police state. It's going to be awesome. It is going to be awesome. So if you can get to New York City on July 10th, you can be there for our 3 p.m. rally where Nick Brana and Chris O'Lally and myself will all be there to have our demonstration. And then from there, you can be there at our evening event about the legal system and how it's rigged against working people. That would be great. There's going to be a day of action led by the Center for Political Innovation, including our allies from the Libertarian Party, the Rage Against the War Machine Coalition, the People's Party, the Party of Communists USA, the American Student Union. It's going to be a great day of action in New York City. So we'd really love to have you there and participate. We need an anti-imperialist movement now more than ever in the United States as we face the danger of a new world war. We really need that. So we'd like you to be there. And if you can't make it, there's another way that you can help out. If for some reason, not everyone can travel. People have jobs, they're busy, etc. If for some reason you can't make it, one thing that you can do is you can give a contribution directly to the CPI to help the event happen. We have a link here. I'll just provide it here in the chat. We have a link where you can make a contribution via Stripe. You can make a contribution. So you have that option as well. We do have this link, and I'm just about to drop the link right here. If I can just, if you want to give a donation to the CPI, you can do that at this link that I'm dropping in the chat. There's usually a shorter version of it, but I'm not seeing the shorter version. Maybe there's a shorter version on my Facebook I can pull up. I want to get you the more concise link, but we would appreciate a contribution if you can help us out, because that way, we can help pay for expenses and transportation and big fancy banners and bullhorns and all the stuff that you use for rallies and demonstrations. We can use them, and it is helpful. It is very, very helpful. I guess here's the link I'll drop in the chat. If you want to give a contribution directly to the CPI to help with the upcoming events, that would be awesome. Awesome. So yes, July 10th, here's the link. Oh my goodness, there's got to be a better link than that. I don't know what's going on here. Goodness gracious, how does this work, right? There we go. There's got to be a better link than this. Yeah, got to have a better Stripe link than this. Hold on, folks. I will get you a better link, because that link I just sent is not helpful. But yeah, if you want to help us out and have the event, that would be great. We're always looking to get funds together so we can do things. So hold on. There we go. All right. Now we got a link for you. Yeah. If you'd like to help out with those two events that we're doing coming up in New York City, you can send a contribution to the Center for Political Innovation to help cover the costs. And this is the link, the donate link. So you can just send us a link right there if you'd like to contribute. And I'll put the announcements on the screen once again. For July 10th, we're having two events in New York City. The first one will be at 3 p.m. It'll be a demonstration. Peace with Russia, peace with China, no police state. Monday, July 10th, 3 p.m., assembling at 43rd and 6th Avenue. Be there. And that evening, then, we'll be having an indoor mini conference. We'll be doing a mini conference indoors money and American injustice, peace with Russia, peace with China, but also money and American injustice, how the legal system of the United States targets the poor. And if you'd like to send a contribution to help these events go down, by all means, there's a link right down below there that you can give money directly to CPI. That goes to the CPI accounts. That's how that's set up. So we would appreciate it if you could help us out. Just wanted to make folks aware of that. Wanted to let people know they have that option. So there you go. It's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to it because we are speaking for the clear majority of the American people. When we say we don't want war, we are clearly speaking for the very overwhelming majority of the American people. They don't want new military interventions. They don't want new military entanglements. The people of America, they want the troops brought home from Africa. They want the troops brought home from the Middle East. They want the troops brought home from South America. They want the troops brought home from the Pacific and from Asia, from South Korea. The people of America want the troops to be brought home, and so do we. We also want the troops to be brought home. We want, instead, the priority of the American government to be meeting the needs of the people, feeding people, building infrastructure, making breakthroughs in fusion energy, repaving our roads and bridges, building some high-speed railway. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. Center for Political Innovation, we have a 4-point plan that we have often laid out. Step 1 would be a mass mobilization to rebuild the country, hire the unemployed and underemployed young people to start reconstructing this country, give it a high-tech makeover, high-speed railway, new roads, new bridges, new universities, new schools, new hospitals, new water treatment facilities, a whole new country, mobilized to rebuild America. That is step number 1. Step number 2 would be public control of our natural resources. Why is it that big oil companies and big banks and big monopolies get rich off of the soil, off of the natural resources that are found within the soil of the United States? America's oil, America's coal, America's timber, America's natural gas, all of this should go to make America a wealthier country, not to enrich big monopolies and big bankers. So we call for public control of our natural resources. Step number 3 is public control of the banking system and canceling the debt. At this point, we should abolish the Federal Reserve because the Constitution of the United States says that only the federal government can print money. In addition to that, we should have a state monopoly on credit at a local, state, and federal level. We should have the lending of money be done strategically in the overall economic vision of the country. Have the purse strings of the credit be controlled by the community to make sure that growth is continued, to stimulate businesses that are good for the community, to stimulate, housing and the needs of the people. Have a public monopoly on credit. And then the final step, plank number 4, is the economic Bill of Rights that Franklin Delano Roosevelt spoke of: the right to a job, the right to housing, the right to education, ensuring that the American people are guaranteed that they will have a place in the country's economy, and investing in our population. It's not simply a matter of giving people education as a handout, giving people housing and food as a handout. The idea is that if we're going to have a strong country, we need strong people. And strong people are educated. And strong people are well fed and they're housed. And that in order to make the country stronger overall, we invest in our population, not the profits of Wall Street banks. And those are the 4 steps, the 4-point economic plan of the Center for Political Innovation: public control of banking, public control of oil and gas, mass mobilization to rebuild the country, and an economic Bill of Rights. Those 4 things don't necessarily add up to socialism. They don't necessarily add up to socialism. One could have socialism and not have those 4 things. One could have a society that had those 4 things and not be socialist, rather. However, it would be quite difficult to push back all that capitalist power. And if there was such a mobilization, such a confrontation mobilized around those four things, if the country was so mobilized as to push back the power of the big bankers, push back the power of the big oil monopolies and the energy corporations, at that point, socialism wouldn't be that far off. And that this is an economic program that would rejuvenate the United States, that would put the United States on better terms with Russia and China and build a better relationship. And yes, that's our 4-point economic plan. Folks, it's the 1st of July in New York City. It's a Saturday. Went and had breakfast with a friend. Shout out to you, friend, if you're watching. After that, I went home. We had our weekly Zoom meeting for the Center for Political Innovation. Shout out to all of you who were there. A good number of people were there to talk about our plans, getting ready for July 10th. And, we've got a reading group. The Center for Political Innovation has a reading group. It's going to start reading and studying together. And we have an onboarding committee for new members to kind of get to know them. And it was a great meeting today. A lot of things were discussed. And then after that, my wife and I, we went to go see the new Indiana Jones movie. We did do that. Last night, you asked me, I think it was Gabby, sent me a super chat and asked me what I was planning on doing during my July 4th weekend. Well, I said that I was planning to go and see the Indiana Jones movie with my wife. And so I did. There's no polite ways to say this, but it was not a good movie. I've never seen Raiders of the Lost Ark. I had seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade with Sean Connery as Indiana Jones' father. I had seen the Temple of Doom, but this movie that they just made, yeah, my wife and I were looking at each other. We were not impressed. Wasn't a good film. I guess the very end was kind of quirky. I will say that. It started out just kind of as another action movie, but the way it was shot, the way it was filmed, there wasn't much character development. You didn't get that attachment that you get from watching the 80s movies. It didn't give you that happy feeling that you get from watching Indiana Jones or watching, the old Supermans or, it was kind of, you were on edge. You were on the edge of your seat the whole time, but it was dark. It was a little bit darker. Everything's very dark these days. Things have darker themes. I will say it went from being an action movie to at the end, it turned into Back to the Future kind of. And that was pretty weird. And I didn't see that coming. And that was entertaining. The twist at the end was amusing. The sudden change of location. And I won't give away too much. I guess if people are planning to go see the movie themselves, I don't want to ruin it for them. But they did do something rather creative towards the end of the movie. The last 10, 15 minutes of the movie, they did something that you didn't see coming. But it was still it wasn't a very well-made film. They really had to deal with the fact that Harrison Ford is an old man. I don't understand this, right? Harrison Ford, he's an old man, right? He did Star Wars. He was Han Solo. He was in a number of different movies, and then we didn't hear from Harrison Ford, right? You just didn't hear from him, right? He was Han Solo, who's scruffy looking, right? And he was Han Solo, and then, he was making movies into the 90s. He was making movies, and then he just kind of stopped, right? I think he did Con Air, right? Or was it Air Force One or Con Air or one of those airplane hijacking movies? And he made some movie where he pretended to be Amish because he was running from the mafia or something. And he made a lot of different movies. People like Harrison Ford because he's got that, I'm Harrison Ford, right? But it's like we hadn't heard from Harrison Ford for a long time because he's an old man. He's an old guy. He's relaxing. He's enjoying his retirement. But now, they're dragging Harrison Ford out and they're making him make more movies. Yeah. Noah Schenk knows his movie trivia, by the way. It was Air Force One. Con Air is Nick Cage. True story. This happened. True story. Got to tell this story. Got to have a segue, right? What do you call that? I don't know. Redirect. I don't know. There's a name for that where you just take things in a totally different direction. Since we're talking about Harrison Ford and all that, there was a kid at my school when I was in 4th grade, and his name was Connor, right? And around that time, the movie Con Air had just come out. And one day I went and sat next to him at the lunch table. He had a very angry look on his face. We were 4th graders. You know, people take things a lot more seriously when they're in 4th grade. He had this angry look on his face. And he said to me, "My name is Connor, not Con Air." Right? Apparently, somebody had just discovered that the movie Con Air had just come out. His name was Connor. He said to me, "My name is Connor, not Con Air." And he was quite angry about this. And at the time, I turned to him and I thought it was pretty funny. And I said, "I'll just call you Air Force One." I thought that was hilarious. I thought that was a good one-liner. He looked at me just like, "You're stupid." So there you go. But that was, yeah, I do remember when Connor was very upset that people were calling him Con Air. And I said, "Well, I'll just call you Air Force One." I thought that was funny. Yeah. But yeah. But Harrison Ford, he's one of those actors. I did see an interview with Harrison Ford where he was interviewed about his first role in a movie. I don't know if you know this, but the first role that Harrison Ford ever had in a movie, it was like around like 1969, 1970. He was a very young man, and he played a bellhop in a movie. He played a bellhop, and I think this is a brilliant story because it really just kind of shows you there's a lot in this. It's kind of funny, but it's more than a one-liner. It's a good story, and I believe this actually happened. I really do believe this actually happened. Harrison Ford, in many interviews, he tells the story of his first role in a movie. He was a bellhop in a hotel. There was a scene in a hotel where there's, you know, the two main characters in the movie are talking, and then a bellhop walks in and reads them a telegram. That's what he played. He was a bellhop. And so he got the role. That was his first speaking role in a movie, Harrison Ford. He walked in, he read the message, walked out. And after that, he went to go talk to his agent who was talking to him. And his agent said, "No," he said, "I'm not going to work with you anymore." And his agent dumped him after that. And he said to his agent, like, what's the deal? Why are you dumping me? And he said, "Well, you know, if someone's a really famous actor, if someone's got the potential to be like a really famous actor, the first time they're in a movie, everyone looks at them in the movie and they think, that's a famous actor. That's a movie star." And he said, "You know, when you were in this movie, people didn't look at you and say, that's a movie star. So I'm not going to work with you anymore." And the agent, you know, got rid of him. And Harrison Ford tells the story, and he says he turned to his agent and he said, "Well, I was going more for that's a bellhop." And I mean, that's funny, kind of, right? You know, the agent was saying that he wanted everyone to look at him and say, that's a movie star. And he said, "Well, I was hoping they would look at me and say, that's a bellhop." But it kind of points to the reality of sometimes life is better when people just do the job at hand, right? You know, sometimes people really appreciate that. I cannot read the New York Times. I cannot read the New York Times. Let me reemphasize. I cannot read the New York Times. The Wall Street Journal has the exact same politics as the New York Times, maybe slightly more Republican, but it's the same kind of standard pro-imperialist neocon rag. But it's written for the reader, not the writer. The New York Times, everything is written in a very highfalutin, "I am trying to prove to you what an amazing writer I am. This is my one chance to prove that I wrote for the New York Times," and blah, blah, blah. And it has got this like smug, arrogant, self-important, it's like they're writing a novel. And it's like you have to read the whole goddamn article before you even figure out what they're getting to. And it's everyone who writes for the New York Times is trying to write like a movie star, right? You're supposed to read it and say, that's a movie star. But I just want to read the New York Times. I just want to read the goddamn New York Times. I want to read it as that's a bellhop, right? I want to know what's happening in the world. That's why I'm trying to read the New York Times. The New York Times is not for people who want to know what's happening in the world. It's for writers to prove how amazing they are as writers and to impress you. I mean, that's a problem. right? And that's one of the problems that like artists, writers have, is that sometimes it is, with writers, with actors, with others, sometimes you just have to do the job. You're assigned a job and you do it, right? And I mean, and if you prove yourself to be reliable in doing your job, that can mean way more, way more than proving you have amazing talent and skills. And that often when you're dealing with things like film production or TV production or writers or whatever, when they're all trying to show you how amazing they are, they're all trying to impress you with their acting ability, with their writing ability, that it leads to a situation where people aren't just doing the goddamn job at hand. And when people aren't doing the job at hand, right, it's frustrating. And that if you really want to move ahead, I mean, this is, if you want to be a more successful writer, rather than writing in the hopes that people will discover that you're the next Charles Dickens, write something that accomplishes what the assignment is. If someone assigns you to write an article that accomplishes a certain task, write it. Show that you can carry out the task at hand. Show that you can be the bellhop, right? If you're assigned the role of the bellhop in the goddamn movie, just be a good bellhop, right? And just show up and be a good bellhop. And then the next time they need a bellhop in a movie, they'll call you because you did the job really well. And then maybe then they'll try it another role. But often when you do the job that you're assigned very well, rather than trying to use the job that you're assigned to prove that you are a genius, often that is much more career advancing, in the arts, I would argue, than people who try to, that's how it is in movies about movies, right? They all get their big break, their big moment. It doesn't work like that. In fact, you look at some of the big careers in Hollywood, a lot of them in Hollywood or in entertainment or in writing or whatever, these are people who worked their way up bit by bit by bit by making real lasting relationships with people in the business, and that's one thing that should be pointed out. And that a lot of people miss that, right? That there's kind of a get rich quickness in our culture, and it's toxic. It's absolutely toxic. There's some get rich quickness all over our culture, and it's causing people to act stupidly. And I've seen this in many aspects of life. I saw this in something that happened, something that was going on with a relative of mine that I won't get into the details about, a conflict that they were having to mediate in their small town. And there was something that was going on. There's something that happened to me, something in my life a couple months ago, and I dealt with it. And again, there's this, everyone has it in their head that they're going to get rich quick, right? That they're going to find, the golden ticket. They're going to find the golden ticket, and that's how they're going to get ahead in life. And I mean, things like that do happen. That is true. But more generally, the way people advance is by moving ahead gradually, one step at a time, and by maintaining real relationships with people, learning to trust people, proving themselves to be reliable and trustworthy. And gradually they accomplish one thing, and then they accomplish another thing, and then they accomplish another thing. And that's generally how people move ahead in this world, and that often even, situations where there is, kind of a golden ticket, right, where an opportunity just kind of falls into someone's lap, they are able to utilize it because they've done so many other things first, right? And there's many examples of this, but that if somebody is handed a golden ticket, but they're not up for it, right? They haven't prepared, they don't have the experience, often they'll just fall on their face, and it's not really helpful. And meanwhile, if you pursue actively every opportunity that you're given, and if you pursue every opportunity that you're given, and you do your darndest at it, eventually there's going to be a payout. Not everything you do in life has a payout, right? Sometimes you do things in life and they don't pay off, and other times you do things in life and they pay off very well, and other times the payout doesn't come quickly. This is something people people will often not recognize is the payout comes very slowly. You develop a relationship with somebody, you become better at doing something, you learn from an experience. A lot of times people forget that, right? That sometimes if you want to get ahead in life, it's simply by doing things and failing. You have to screw up in order, you have to try something and you have to see. Sometimes bad things have to happen to you. And this sounds condescending. And this is the kind of thing people get angry about sometimes when you say it to them, because, no one, when you've had a bad experience, no one likes to hear, oh, well, you're going to be stronger because of this. But sometimes, right, you have to do better. You think about someone who's a really good waiter in a restaurant. They work in a fancy restaurant, they get really good tips. Well, in order to be able to carry those dishes the way they do, at some point early on in their career as a waiter, they dropped and broke some dishes, and they had to drop those dishes first to know how to not drop the dishes, right? And that, if they never drop the dishes, they would never learn how to not drop the dishes. I'm trying to give an example, but there's many examples of this that I've seen. But back to the whole thing about writers, like why I don't like the New York Times. When I read the New York Times, the writer is showing off to me. He's trying to impress me with what an amazing writer he is, or she is, or they is, right? They're trying to impress me with how amazing they are. But when I read the Wall Street Journal, I just, I learn what I need to learn by reading the articles. The articles just tell me what I need to know, and I get the information from the articles, and that's why I'm reading it. And it's much more convenient for me, the reader. I often feel like people write and they forget that anyone is reading this, that, they forget that there is actually a reader on the other end of their writing. And that's something, when you're writing, you should always be imagining the reader. Many of the 1970s Hollywood movies, right? You watch Saturday Night Fever, Pretty in Pink, late 70s, early 80s. Those movies that, some of those movies from that time, they just go on and on and on and on. And the plot goes here and the plot goes there and the plot goes there and the plot goes there. And if you watch Saturday Night Fever, what is it about, right? It's about John Travolta, right? Mr. Cooper. Oh my God, I'm John Travolta, and I work at a hardware store, but I just want to dance. Oh my God, I'm John Travolta. I just want to dance. Right? He's a guy. And he lives in Brooklyn, New York, and he's Italian. He's in an ethnic Italian family, and he just wants to dance. He just wants to go out and party and dance. Oh my God. Right. And he works at a hardware store and sells people paint. And then at night he goes out and dances. But the movie, it takes so many different twists and turns, right? First there's a dance contest that he's entering and he's trying to win some money. And then they're on the bridge. They're at one point, they're on the bridge that goes out to Staten Island, and somebody falls off the bridge and dies. And he's got this girlfriend who pretends that she's, that she still lives in the neighborhood, but she actually works as a secretary in Manhattan. And it's like she has living a lie or something. It's so long and complicated, and it just goes on and on. And people tell me that the Hollywood writers had too much power, right? That we generally sympathize with Hollywood writers. They don't get compensated enough. They don't, they get their creativity sandwiched by producers and, the marketers. And, we sympathize with writers overwhelmingly. But, at some points, you watch some of these 1970s movies and they just go on and on and on. And the plot goes here and the plot goes there. And this happens and that happens. And oh my God, I'm John Travolta. Oh my God, what am I going to do? Like my friend fell off the bridge. And I don't know what's going to happen after that. And then I won the dance contest. But then I found out my girlfriend's a secretary in Manhattan. Oh my God. Oh my God. It just goes on and on and on and on and on and on. I will tell you this. I was looking. Right. This is the ultimate nerd moment, right? This is a nerd confession, right? This is something that I shouldn't be admitting on this stream, but I am admitting this on the stream. right? So I was looking at the Marxist Internet Archive, right? And they have the Encyclopedia of Anti-Revisionism. And I remember I was reading the Encyclopedia of Anti-Revisionism on the Marxist Internet Archive. And I was reading about how at the time the movie Saturday Night Fever came out, the Revolutionary Communist Party had just had a split, and the Revolutionary Worker Headquarters and the Revolutionary Communist Party were no longer cooperating with each other, right? So they had a split, and so they were writing articles against each other. And I you can't make this up, okay? You cannot make this up. I'm going to find the link for you right now. The Revolutionary Communist Party and the Revolutionary Youth, or whatever, the Revolutionary Student Brigade, they wrote reviews of Saturday Night Fever against each other. They wrote polemics against each other's reviews of the movie. I'm not exaggerating. I am not exaggerating. I will find it for you. They wrote reviews of the movie against each other, and they argued about what the movie meant. And they had different interpretations of the movie, and they were fighting with each other about what the movie meant. I kid you not. I will find you the link now. It was really something special. And I'm going to find that link for you right now. But the two communist groups, the Maoist communist group that just split, they had a big fight with each other about Saturday Night Fever and what it meant. Yeah, it was wild. It was very, very wild. So let me see if I can find that. Let me see if I can find that for you. Because it was wild. It was very, very, very wild. I found these reviews of Saturday Night Fever with the Revolutionary Communist Party and the Revolutionary Worker Headquarters, Revolutionary Student Brigade, fighting about what the movies meant, and that was insane. It was just utterly insane. It was utterly insane to read. And yeah, I think this is it. I believe this is it. If I'm not mistaken. Right. But it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild to watch them fight about Saturday Night Fever. So yeah, there you go. That was pretty wild. I think it's this. Right? No, or is it? It might be this. This is an issue of their magazine that came out during that time period, right? I think it might be in here. It may be somewhere else, but yeah, I look at the Marxist Internet Archive, and I appreciate these things, and I do appreciate reading how these people fought with each other, how communists fought with each other in different times, and how they analyzed. Oh, here we go. Here it is. Sorry, disregard that previous link. Here it is. Saturday Night Fever expose. The Revolutionary Communist Youth Brigade attacks youth for being youth. It is a long article of the Revolutionary Student Brigade attacking the Revolutionary Communist Youth Brigade over their interpretation of the movie Saturday Night Fever. That is what it is. Here, I will even put it on the screen, actually. I will put it on the screen so we can enjoy this ourselves, right? You want to talk about some nerd niche communist history? Well, folks, this is some nerd niche communist history. We're going to put it on the screen here, right? This was an actual fight between actual communists a long time ago, probably 1978, 79. Here we go, right? Here we go, right? RCYB attacks youth for being youth. There you go, right? What does it say? Let's read it. Last month, the Young Communist reviewed the hit movie Saturday Night Fever. Since then, a plethora of reviews have filled the pages of the left press with headlines like Saturday Night Racism, Saturday Night Poison, and Saturday Night, a movie that lies about workers. All are similar in one respect. They all have one-sided denunciations of the movie. Oh, boy. They're all similar. They all stand in contrast to the review of The Young Communist. We describe the movie as a fairly accurate picture of the lives of many youth in this country today, although, as pointing it out and attempting to offer a road forward for the movie, Missed the Boat offers instead a future that isn't much, and the future it does offer is one leaving the neighborhood, the working class, against hope, and it makes it into the glitter world of Manhattan offices. At least one of newspapers admitted it. The Revolutionary Communist Youth newspaper of forlorn, quickly forgotten former members of the RSB. I mean, it's yeah, I'm not going to continue reading it, but yeah, you get the picture. This is communists fighting about the movie Saturday Night Fever when it came out in the late 70s. There were various Maoist communists who went to the movie and had different interpretations of the movie, they had different opinions, but take a look, right? I mean, they've got a nice big picture there. I think that's John Travolta himself. Oh my God, I'm doing a dance. Oh my God. Saturday Night Fever, expose. RCYB attacks youth for being youth. It's a polemic from one communist group to another communist group. What does this say here? Above, why is this man crying? Above, the Shah of Iran breaks into tears upon hearing of a growing Iranian student protests against his rotten regime, as reported in The Young Communist. There you go, right? RCYB has nothing but contempt for the youth. Well, the feeling is mutual. There you go, right? Japan, fists fly at the airport, right? Somalian troops leave. Ethiopians score victory. Right. That is a relic from another time. A relic from another time. Right. The communists of the 1970s. Funky says they are taking this way too seriously. Exactly. Based, says Jenny, and young Bob Avakian. I think this is polemicizing against. This is the people who broke with Bob Avakian, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. But yeah, I found this years ago, and I just died laughing reading how they picked apart each other's reviews. This goes to show you that BreadTube has always been around, right? Even before you had ContraPoints and all of that, you did have BreadTube types sitting there fighting about movies. But there you go. There you go. Reminds me of this Maoist review of Shrek 2. Oh, my goodness. Well, let's pull up the Maoist review of Shrek 2. Right? I mean, how can we not? Tyler, I didn't realize that there was a Maoist review of Shrek 2. Let's go read the Maoist review of Shrek 2. A radical attack on class, nation, and gender oppression. Shrek 2. Gender bureaucrat, enemy of the people, fairy godmother, lives a life of dogmatism, following the scripts in Cinderella, Snow White, and the books that she keeps in her library. Living off the exploited workers and selling hocus pocus to the people, like many other unproductive sector flim-flam artists we can see and think of today, fairy godmother spreads her poisonous visions of the future everywhere and lords over even the king himself. Seeking to appropriate the sexuality of the king's daughter for her son, fairy godmother does her best to spread speciesist propaganda against ogres. Oh my God, this has to be satire. One of which already married the king's daughter, thus making her unavailable to the fairy godmother's son. The evil speciesist propaganda finds fertile ground in the king's mind and most of the people of the kingdom. Highly class-conscious characters include Pinocchio watching television immediately through the pigdom's entertainment media, getting off the couch to rush to help the compatriots locked up while filmed for a cop show. Once out of prison, our heroes rely on a toiling baker to launch an all-out assault on the bastion of reaction, the castle, taken over by fairy godmothers plotting. Using the past to serve the present as Mao instructed artists, the directors of Shrek 2 rattle off cultural references like a machine gun, making Godzilla sounds and tearing down Starbucks on the way to the castle. Our heroes arrive on time to do battle with the fairy godmother. Borrowing a move from another movie, the king dives to absorb the attack of the fairy godmother and ends up turning into a frog. by running to the king, to frog cultural references in reverse, making Godzilla-type character a hero. The directors of Shrek 2 show just how upside down and backwards our culture really is. Well, there you go. There you go. Who can argue with that, right? You would think it has to be satire, but actually it wasn't. This was Maoist Internationalist Movement, MIM. They were famous for their movie reviews. They wrote wild movie reviews like what you just read. They wrote one of Independence Day, I believe. If someone wants to pull up that link, that was totally amusing. They wrote one of Independence Day. And the review that they wrote of Independence Day was they said that if space aliens did indeed land and try to conquer the Earth, it would be necessary to form a class collaborationist united front to defeat the galactic imperialists. And I thought that was definitely amusing. I remember one time I got arrested during an Occupy Wall Street protest, and I was sitting in central booking, in lockup in central booking, talking with other people about this. We had an intense conversation about, if space aliens did invade, would it be necessary to form a class collaborationist united front to defeat the imperialists? And that was the Maoist position. The revisionist position would be to just support the general resistance to the aliens that would be widespread by the militaries of the bourgeoisie and the imperialists. And the ultra left Trotskyite position would say that only the working class, the proletariat, could defeat the imperialists. But Maoism had the correct line that one should build a class collaborationist united front to defeat the galactic imperialists. So there you go. Shouldn't U.S. citizens / working class be able to organize around fighting BlackRock, Vanguard Group, and Blackstone? Seems like most should be able to agree. That's a very good question, and we're writing it down. Very good. Very, very good question. And keep the super chats rolling in, folks. Give me something to talk about in the second half of the show. Now, Funky is referencing a very famous episode of The Twilight Zone. I don't know if people have ever seen The Twilight Zone. Famous late 1950s, early 1960s TV program. There's a famous episode of The Twilight Zone. The plot goes like this. There's a bunch of aliens who come down to the planet Earth, and people are scared at first, but the aliens are very nice. They're just really, really nice, and they give new energy, and they expand the human life expectancy, and they're just being really, really nice, and they're just helping people. They're just helping people and being so kind, these aliens. They're just really, really nice. And in addition to doing all these nice things for people, building hospitals, building schools, and solving the problem of world hunger and curing cancer, the aliens, they've decided that they want to take the humans back to their own planet, back to their home planet. And they ask the aliens, why are you doing this? And the aliens repeatedly hold up this book they have. And the name of the book is To Serve Man. That's the name of their book. And they just say, oh, well, we do it because we've got this book that says To Serve Man. And so everyone's really happy, and they're going to take the first trip back to the aliens' home planet. And they're loading up, these humans to go in there. But there's somebody who's been decoding the book. They've been decoding the book, decoding it from the alien language, and they're decoding it, and they discover it's a cookbook. It's a cookbook. And as the humans are loading up onto the spaceship, she shouts, it's a cookbook. And the aliens are taking them back to the home planet to eat them. It's to serve them for dinner, right? To serve man. And, that episode, I believe, first of all, that is an anti-communist analogy. And you say, Caleb, well, you're paranoid, right? That's the kids in my class at school, right? We talked about Animal Farm, and they're like, I said it's about communism, and they're like, oh, everything's about communism, Caleb, with you. Well, Animal Farm actually is about communism. And I would maintain that, yes, To Serve Man is about communism, because you have to remember that in 1949, the Chinese Communist Party had just taken power. And the Chinese Communist Party, their slogan was serve the people. Serve the people. That's what they have on all their buttons and everything. Serve the people. That was the slogan. It remains the slogan of the Chinese Communist Party. Serve the people. So I believe that this was a dig at the Chinese Communist Party. And at the time, this was, the Cold War, anti-communist hysteria. Sherry Specter agrees with me, right? Anti-communist hysteria was big. And the idea was that, communists say that they want to give you jobs, they want to give you health care, they want to get rid of racism, they want to empower you, but it's actually just so they can devour you. It's just so they can gobble you up, right? But that points to a kind of paranoia that I think you see it a lot in a lot of libertarian literature, right? You see this kind of paranoia about, no one's actually nice, right? No one actually cares about anyone else. Everyone's just a selfish person, and that if anyone tries to do you a favor, they actually have a manipulative agenda beneath the surface, right? You see a kind of like paranoid law of the jungle, fear of your neighbor theme in a lot of libertarian writing. The movie Slumdog Millionaire, that is an Ayn Rand manifesto, right? The little boy, and one of the themes in the movie is he's blinding, this old man who's helping the homeless kids. He helps these homeless kids, he provides them with a place to live or whatever, and then they go out and beg, and then he starts blinding them because if they're blind, they can bring in more money. And so he starts, blinding the kids, poking their eyes out so they can bring in more money. And it's supposed to be, see, he said he was trying to help you, but he's actually just a manipulative, bad person. And right, that kid who, that blind kid you see on the street that you give money to, well, he's been blinded on purpose to manipulate your feelings of compassion and empathy. So there you go. And that's really common in Ayn Rand libertarian literature. And that to serve man is a similar thing. Privatizations proposed in Russia could be the most dangerous fifth column. And that's really prevalent now. This idea that no one is really trying to help anybody else, right? Anybody who comes along and says they want to serve the people is actually going to try to serve them on a silver platter. Anyone who comes along and is trying to, be nice to hungry people is actually just going to blind you. This is a really big theme. This really fits in with that philosophical irrationalism that I keep hammering home about Ayn Rand. It goes back to Friedrich Nietzsche. The idea, and then Leo Strauss definitely continues it. This idea that there is no real objective truth. The nature of the universe is chaos rather than order. And that anyone who attempts to impose order onto the universe is being a totalitarian. Any attempt to explain the universe with order is a totalitarian scam. And anyone who attempts to tell you that morality and right and wrong exists is just a totalitarian, authoritarian trying to manipulate you. This is what they're preaching at us. I mean, on Netflix, they're preaching it. In the universities, they're preaching it. And it's really toxic stuff. This is postmodernism. When Jordan Peterson talks about postmodern neo-Marxists, the postmodern neo-Marxists and the lobsters, what he's talking about, though, is it's not Marxism. Marxism is an ideology that says there is objective truth, that there is a rational nature to the universe, that through dialectical and historical materialism, we can understand where the universe is going. And Marxism says that right and wrong do exist. And Marxism is not postmodern. Postmodernism is a school of thought that says the only value is in deconstruction, and that the nature of the universe is chaos, and that any attempt to establish order or establish a belief system that is coherent, that defines morality, that attempts to explain the universe is simply an attempt, is totalitarian. And the only ethical thing one can do is deconstruct these belief systems, and that competing narratives are a mechanism for deconstructing, right? Competing narratives show that there's not one single reality and truth, and it deconstructs any totalitarian attempt to present truth. And this is what the postmodernists believe. And postmodernism is very dangerous because human societies are held together by ideology. I've often made the analogy that an ideology is like when you're driving in the car. You know where you're going, you know where you came from, you know how you're getting there, so you drive. But if you don't know where you came from, and you don't know where you're going, and you don't know how you're getting there, you're going to stop the car. You don't know where you're going. Human beings need to be able to point to the map and say, that's where I am. Human beings need to be able to say, this is what is right, this is what is wrong, this is who I am, this is what I can do. Right? Human beings need that. It is a definitive thing. And that's why every society that has ever existed has invented a religion, an ideology with which to hold itself together. And during the Cold War, at first, the way that the U.S. imperialists decided that they were going to fight against ideology, the way that they were going to fight against it was they were going to push their ideology, right? They were going to say, well, the communists are godless atheists, but we have our Western pro-capitalist Christian ideology, and we're going to put all the commies in jail, and we're going to be really military, and we're going to, be authoritarian, and that's how we're going to defeat the commies. That's what they did for the first bit of the Cold War, the Korean War, McCarthyism, etc. But it didn't work. And during the Korean War, and you really should read about this, there's a very good book called The Search for the Manchurian Candidate. During the Korean War, there were a number of American soldiers, GIs, who got captured by the communists in North Korea and in China. And they were held captive, and many of them became communists in the POW camp, right? They were in the POW camp with other captured soldiers held by the Chinese and Korean communists. And many of them became communists during the war and started making radio broadcasts condemning American imperialism, confessing to having committed war crimes. And U.S. media went nuts. They said, this can't be happening. How is it that these good boys from Idaho and Texas and Iowa, how is it that these good, brave young men, how is it that they came to, confess to war crimes and convert to communism? How is it possible? Right? I mean, it couldn't be that, maybe the Korean War was wrong and that, bombing and killing, millions of Korean people because they want socialism and want to drive out the imperialists is not right. I mean, it couldn't be that, right? We just got to assume that there's nothing genuine about what the communists believe. So how is it that these good young men, got changed? And that's where the term brainwashing comes from. That's how the word brainwash entered American political discourse. And starting in the 1950s up into the 1960s, there was a brainwashing craze in American culture. And that's the movie, The Manchurian Candidate, came out. It's a Hollywood movie, based on a novel about like a member of Congress who was brainwashed by the communists, and they pull out, a deck of cards, and he sees the deck of cards, and then he's like, turns into a communist super soldier, must destroy capitalism. He looks like a normal conservative right-wing guy until they pull out the ace of spades, and then suddenly he turns into a communist robot, right? And that all this talk of brainwashing came in, and that the CIA and American intelligence, they really did believe that there was some like magical communist voodoo that they did, that they thought, it was anti-Asian racism, and you watch old movies like Fu Manchu that are really anti-Asian and racist. They really did believe that, like, in Korea and in China, the Asian people went, whoa, you will believe in communism. You will believe in communism. And that these American GIs were like, yes, must believe in communism. Must believe in communism. Must, that's what they thought. And so they did all kinds of research into brainwashing and mind control and all of this. And what they discovered was that there's not much there. And if you actually read the book, The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, it's fascinating because there's really not that much there. What they did discover is that for people whose belief systems are very black and white, once you flip them, it's very easy to get them to be, on the other side. That the GIs who became communists were the ones who had it in their minds that America had never done anything wrong, ever. That America was the greatest country in the world. The commies are a bunch of dirty, rotten, lying scum. Their airplane crashes, they end up in the enemy camp, and they're thinking they're going to die, right? They're fearing death, but they're not dead. And they would get them isolated all by themselves with nobody but a communist who spoke English, who could talk to them. and they would show them Emmett Till's mutilated body. They'd show them pictures of lynchings in the South. And they'd say, this is what America really is. Look what America does to black people. And of course, they would say, that's not true. That's a bunch of communist propaganda. America would never do that. Black people in America are happy. And they would say that's not true. And they'd show them New York Times articles about lynching. They'd show them congressional statements, and they'd have them there isolated in the cell. And they'd say they would make it inescapable to these guys that America had indeed done bad things at one time in its history. And of course, these GIs, guys, they're fearing that they're going to die. They're isolated. Their airplane crashed. They're separated from anyone. They're only hearing their interrogator. And finally, they would crack. They would crack and be like, wow, America does lynch black people. And, those bombs I was dropping, there were actually people in the villages I was bombing, and they got killed, and they would break, right? And it comes through the fact that, first of all, when you're being interrogated, right, that's part of why they hold people in solitary confinement, is you naturally want to please who you're around. And this is the whole Stockholm syndrome and all of that, right? Is that, if the only person you see is your interrogator, you will want to please your interrogator, because you want to be, human beings have a desire to get along with the people they're around. So if you isolate somebody and the only person they see is their interrogator, they will try to please their interrogator. So eventually, through the process of being isolated, not seeing anyone but the communist presenting them with, indisputable evidence that, in fact, America was not a perfect, great country, that it had committed horrendous crimes, that it was killing civilians in the Korean War, that it did lynch and murder black people and do horrendous things to black people. These GIs, the ones who had this, this very black and white light switch worldview, they would crack. And they would just, wow, America is evil. You're right. That's true. And they would crack. And once they cracked, at that point, then they would put them in a cell with a bunch of other guys who'd already cracked, communists, and they'd start teaching them communism. And at that point, those guys would eat it right up, because if America is not all good, then the communists must be right. Right. And it's that kind of, if you have a perfect solution, and this is what they call the perfect solution fallacy, right? If you think that one side is all good, all you have to do to discredit that is prove one thing that it's wrong about, and click, and you go to the other side. Writing it down. And so these GIs who had a very one-sided, simplistic worldview, they would crack and they would go to the other side. Boom, that easy, right? However, the CIA and all of them observed that the communists who didn't, or I'm sorry, the GIs who didn't have a one-sided worldview, the GIs who already knew that America lynched black people, who were already aware that the United States wasn't perfect, who already had somewhat of a cynical view, they weren't as easy to crack like this. They'd show them the picture of Emmett Till and they'd be like, yeah, that's awful. That's really, really horrible. But that doesn't mean you guys are good. And it was the GIs who had a nuanced view. They were the ones who didn't crack. And they realized this. And that's the origin of postmodernism. Okay? That's the origin of postmodern philosophy. Because they realized that it was much more effective to fight communism with nuance. There's truth on both sides. Everything is just a matter of opinion. It was much more effective to fight communism that way than it was to fight communism with, we're absolutely right and you're 100% wrong. And that over the course of the Cold War, the synthetic left was an attempt to introduce confusion into communism. And it was also an attempt to kind of introduce a layer of shades of gray into U.S. society. And I quote in my new book, there's actually a quote from the book, The Manchurian Candidate, and it talks about how when people would be drugged up, when they would get people on LSD, they would feel like, they like they were neutral in the Cold War, like they plague on both your houses feeling, right? And that by getting everyone drugged up, when people are on drugs, they're just like, oh, there's multiple ways of seeing things, and they kind of, there's a lot of people who are on acid, right? And they'll hallucinate and they'll see things that aren't there, but they'll be convinced those things are always there. It's just when they're on acid, they can actually see them. That when they're on acid, they're just seeing things through another light. They're seeing the spirit world or something like that, right? And that MK Ultra and the drug program, the mass flow of drugs into the United States, getting young Americans drugged out like crazy, and the manipulation of the left and the promotion of postmodern philosophy that says there is no real truth. All of this was a psychological operation to prevent communism from being victorious, and it worked, right? And they also introduced this into the communist world. And Khrushchev's secret speech, the reason it was so damaging was that the Soviet Union had presented itself as heaven on earth, right? They were entering the early stages of communism and the final years of Stalin's life. If you read Twilight of World Capitalism by William Z. Foster, which is a great book, one thing that it says that is wrong is it says that the Soviet Union was entering the early stages of communism, right? They were beyond socialism. They were entering the early stages of communism. The Soviet Union was presenting itself, and many of the Soviet Union's allies and followers believed it was heaven on earth. They believed that it was they were really loyal to it, right? So Khrushchev's secret speech, Khrushchev gets in there, and he's the leader of the Soviet Union. And he was Stalin's right-hand man when Stalin was in power. And he takes power, and he gets in there and he says, well, actually, Stalin, the leader, he was a piece of shit, and everything the U.S. media all said about Stalin, it was all true. Well, that has a psychologically devastating toll on the global communist movement. And then you introduce the synthetic left that says, well, you can be for socialism with a human face, right? You can be for democratic socialism. You can be for all the, and it creates this ambiguity, right? And at the time the Soviet Union fell, many of those young people who were marching, if you'd asked them, are you marching for capitalism? They would have said no, right? They would have said, no, we're marching for socialism with a human face, like the Prague Spring. We're marching for democratic socialism. We're marching for anarchism. We're marching for Trotskyism. We're marching for human consciousness and empowerment. It's not anti-communist or pro-communist. It's pro-human empowerment, brother. It's, they created the new left, postmodernism, the new left, MK Ultra, the drug culture. All of this was created in order to create all of this ambiguity and nuance to deconstruct communism. That it was more effective to fight communism with deconstruction, with philosophical irrationalism, than it was to defeat communism with just straight up anti-communism. And what I maintain, and this is my thesis that I talk about it in my new book, Where is America Going? I talk about it everywhere, is that postmodernism has come home to roost. The chickens have come home to roost. Postmodernism was like a chemical weapon, right? If you send a chemical weapon to your enemy, right? If you shoot sarin nerve gas or mustard gas or some horrendous chemical weapon at your enemy, you dispose of a horrendous chemical weapon at your enemy, right? And then the wind blows, it might blow back into your face. And that's what has happened. During the Cold War, the USA dispersed a psychological weapon called philosophical irrationalism against communism. And it started out as just a way to run damage control in intellectual circles. It started with the Congress for Cultural Freedom and, the CIA basically saying, we got to keep all these great scientists and intellectuals from becoming communists. So let's, start funding a leftism that is anti-communist. They started Partisan Review magazine and Encounter and all of that. That was the first step, was creating a place that Western intellectuals, free thinkers, and et cetera could go before they were communists. Create a place that dissidents can go and not be communists. But then they realized that it was a way of courting the dissident Soviet intellectuals, right? The engineers, the scientists, the college professors, the filmmakers, some of the most privileged people in the Eastern Bloc. They had a level of alienation. They were frustrated with their society, and that with this postmodernism stuff, they could manipulate those people and say, well, you don't have to agree with capitalism, but communism has problems too. And, there's layers of truth in everything. And here's some LSD. Take some LSD and see what it's like. And don't you love Beatles music? And look at this beautiful paintings of Jackson Pollock where he just splatters paint on a canvas, and, that Soviet art, that socialist realism, that's totalitarian. You have to have a political message. You have to have like actual shapes. But Jackson Pollock, he just splats on a canvas. It's freedom, man. And that they created that ambiguity among the intellectuals. What I argued is that this psychological weapon that was deployed in the class struggle against communism has now, it caused the communist world to have a great correction, right? It was awful. The fall of the Soviet Union was horrible. I mean, there were millions of deaths as a result of it. Russia lost its population. People starved. The suicide rate went up. Drug addiction. The fall of the Soviet Union was devastating. It was a devastating thing for the former Soviet Union and the surrounding countries. It was just an awful, awful occurrence. But it forced the communist countries of the world to correct, right? Putin came back into power, in 1999, and they started, moving Russia in an anti-imperialist direction very gradually. But, they, at that point, they realized a lot of the flaws of the Soviet Union. China had adjusted to avoid it with the reform and opening up and Deng Xiaoping theory. Vietnam had an opening up. Cuba and North Korea, they both suffered a lot. And that the communist world was forced by that devastating blow, the fall of the Soviet Union, that was largely rooted in postmodernism. It was a psychological and political defeat. It wasn't an economic one. The Soviet Union had a strong economy up until the end, right? It was a psychological and political defeat. That devastating blow, it forced the communist world to correct itself and to adjust, right? And to admit, look, now around the world, communists are not anti-religious, right? It used to be communists. We maintained that our ideology was 100% correct. Dialectical and historical materialism is correct. There is no God. There is nothing but the material world. We have figured it all out. And if you don't agree with us, you're with the enemy. You're a revisionist. That's how we used to think. But after the fall of the Soviet Union, there's been kind of an opening up. The head of the Russian Communist Party is a Christian. The Bolivarian coalitions of Latin America have a lot of Christian religious leaders in them. And market reforms have come in. And the communist world is largely adjusted. The totalism of the Cold War kind of created an opening for the imperialists to deploy their postmodern weapon. And so the communist countries of the world and the anti-imperialist camp has largely corrected itself. And if you look at the anti-imperialist camp of the world, they've learned from the fall of the Soviet Union and they've adjusted, and they don't have the Soviet system, but they don't have capitalism either. They have a revolutionary government based in communities that's well organized that controls the economy. But within that economy, they have a private sector, they have small businesses, etc. Right? So the communist world has largely adjusted and corrected with Deng Xiaoping theory, socialism with Chinese characteristics, Bolivarianism, etc. The communist world has adjusted. Meanwhile, that weapon that was deposed by the imperialists, that postmodern deconstructionism, there is no truth, there's nothing worth fighting for, this radical liberalism, you can call it, the liberal ideology, philosophical irrationalism, has blown back into the West. And in the Western world, that ideology has sunk in to the point that we're falling apart. Look at the streets of France right now. Look what's happening right now. Look at the United States, that there is no loyalty anymore. The population doesn't believe any ideology that holds society together. And all the institutions and belief systems that hold U.S. society together are crumbling as a result of the very ideas and beliefs that the ruling class has introduced. So philosophical irrationalism, postmodernism, is decaying and destroying Western society. And that creates an opening for us. We have to come in and say, well, philosophical irrationalism is wrong. Right and wrong do exist. And we have to develop some kind of socialism with American characteristics to unite the United States and the West with the anti-imperialist camp and to defeat the big monopolies, the imperialists, the ultra monopolists who are who are presiding over the destruction and decay of the West, right? And this global financial system, imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism that Lenin described, it's now on the rocks. It's facing a long-term crisis of overproduction and the tendency of the falling rate of profits. It can't handle artificial intelligence. So we're seeing that system crack, right? And that creates an opening for us. The communist world and the anti-imperialist countries have largely adjusted, and that's kind of where we stand. So that was a long, roundabout way of giving you some opening remarks, talked about movies, talked about all kinds of things. I hope it was helpful to everybody. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. I'm really glad you enjoyed it. I've got 3 super chats to answer in the second half of our show. But keep me talking, because as I said, send me pitch me a softball, I'll hit a home run, pitch me a fastball, and I'll still hit a home run. So send me some more questions. Let's do the roll call. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Let's call people out as I see them. Names and locations. Who's with us? All right. We got Chris in Salt Lake City. Shout out to you, Chris. Jamie says it was fantastic. I'm glad to hear that. All right. We got Bendigo, Australia, David Fox. We got Nina in Kansas City. Shout out to you, Nina. You're awesome. Lawrence Johnson. Scott in North Miami. Jamie in St. Paul, Minnesota. Sarah in Toronto. Colin in Greensboro. Yada Yisrael in Chicago. Chester in England. Sarah in Toronto. Doris in Jakarta. Right? Patrick in Maine. Ryan in Kansas City. Patch in Arizona. San Diego County. Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati. Joe in New Jersey. St. David's, Bermuda. Heidi in Edinburgh, Scotland. Isabel in Toronto. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Brendan visiting his mom in New Jersey. Cape May in New Jersey. Sherry Spector. Welcome. So glad to have you all here with us tonight. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Micah in Las Vegas is with us. Peter from South America is with us. We got Jerry on Earth. Welcome, Jerry. Welcome. Micah in Las Vegas. Springfield, Massachusetts. Samuel GSI. Welcome, Samuel. We got AJ from New Jersey. AJ from NJ. Welcome, AJ. Right? We got Temple City, California. Welcome, everybody. So glad to have you all here with us tonight. Well, just in case, I know all of you weren't here at the beginning of our show, but if you're in the New York City area, if you could make it to New York City on July 10th, we are having a great event. We're having first a protest. It'll be at 3 p.m. Assemble at 43rd and 6th Avenue. Peace with Russia, peace with China, no police state. It's going to be an important protest and demonstration. So I hope that you can be there. It's going to be very, very cool. And then after the protest that evening, we are having a forum with Joe Vega, Chris Halali, Nick Brana, Money and American Injustice with our guest attorneys, how the U.S. legal system targets the poor. It's going to be a great event. So I hope that you all can be there. I would really love to see you all there. And if you can't make it, why, you can send a donation. And we could really appreciate a donation to help us have a great anti-imperialist rally that we are going to have, protest, and then a great anti-imperialist forum to discuss the U.S. legal system, how it's being weaponized right now. We know we're definitely going to talk about Uhuru. We're definitely going to talk about Trump. We're definitely going to talk about Julian Assange. I mean, how can you not, right? We're going to be talking about the U.S. legal system in general with some lawyers, but we're going to talk about different issues. They're going to come up. So if you want to send us a donation, that's the link. If you want to donate directly, that goes directly to the CPI. Our president, Elizabeth Young, handles the finances. She gives a financial report at every meeting that we have. And that is the place to send a donation. If you would like to help us out, that would be the best place to send a donation. Please send us a donation. That would be the best place to send us a donation. If you could do the Stripe, that would be awesome. That would be awesome. That would be the best way to do it. That would be the best way to do it. Yeah, so you can do that if you want to help us have that event. Some people may be curious. We did order a new banner for the event. I'll just pull that up. This is the banner that will be unfurling in the streets of New York City on July 10th. It's a beautiful banner. And this is what it says: peace with Russia, peace with China, no World War III, no police state, Center for Political Innovation. That is our banner that we're going to be marching through the streets of New York City with. It's going to be awesome. We'll be out there with our signs and our bullhorns. We'll have a sign about Uhuru, hands off Uhuru. It's going to be a great day. Mark your calendar for July 10th. Great anti-imperialist activities in New York City. If you're a friend and an ally of the CPI or of the Rage Against the War Machine Coalition or of the American Student Union, Party of Communists, or of the Libertarian Party, or of the People's Party, you ought to be there. So I really hope that you can all join us. It's going to be an awesome, awesome event. I really hope to see all of you there. So yeah, there you go. So now I have 4 super chats. One just came in here, which I'm gonna write it down. Hold on. I'm gonna write down this other super chat that just came in. Right. Some people think I'm a hypocrite because I once ate at a fast food chain and used YouTube Music. It's like we think. All right. Great question. I'll definitely answer that. So now I'm answering super chat questions. So I'm just going to throw this out there. Just throwing it out there like Donald Trump. But I'm just kidding. But in all honesty, folks, I do want to remind you that those of you who are watching right now, you are the advanced, right? Because most people will watch this tomorrow. They'll watch this the next day. They'll watch this later. You're watching this live. You have the ability to shape how this conversation goes with your super chats. You can decide what I talk about. I've already got 4 super chats to answer, but you can make it go however you want. So if there's something you're really interested in, something you'd like to hear my thoughts on, take advantage of the fact that you're watching this live and send me a super chat. And that'll put you ahead of the game. All the people that are watching it afterwards, they just have to watch whatever I talk about. But you have this ability to interact here live, to tell me what you want me to talk about. So I encourage you to do it. If there's something that's on your mind tonight, something you'd like me to comment on or react to, send me a super chat and I'll put it on the list. So now I start answering super chat questions. First one: shouldn't U.S. citizens / working class be able to organize around fighting BlackRock, Vanguard Group, and Blackstone? Seems like something most people should agree to. Well, MJ, Anti-Imperialist Party, I do agree. And I would argue that building an anti-monopoly coalition against these big banks and their degrowth agenda, which is what BlackRock is notorious for pushing, their degrowth agenda. They force companies to, adjust to their climate goals, to their woke, stuff, and they're forcing degrowth, and they wrecked the economy of Sri Lanka. And that I would argue that that is exactly what we should be doing. We should be building an anti-monopoly coalition. The target is not the small business owner. The target is not even the lower levels of capital. The target is the ultra monopolies, the Wall Street banks, the Silicon Valley fascists, the technocrats. The target is the ultra monopolies and the ultra rich, the bankers, the oil companies, the Silicon Valley corporations, the tech monopolies. The target is the ultra rich. And it's about building a coalition against the ultra rich in which the working class learns how to fight and learns how to assert its own will and learns how to bring itself into the historical process. That's what I would argue, right? And that is what we are trying to bring about today. We are trying to march forward with an anti-monopoly coalition. And that includes Big Pharma. We got to stand up against Big Pharma, right? And so you're absolutely right. The focus now should be on building an anti-monopoly coalition. And that's the whole point of my new book. The whole point of my new book, Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. You know, I guess I don't have one to wave around like I usually do. It's over there and I don't want to get up. Well, you know what? I will get up. I'm going to get up and go get one of my new books because this is exactly what I talk about. So one quick second, look at my books and be entertained. All right. Dum-dum. The whole point of this book that I wrote, Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. The whole point of this book is to explain where the crisis is coming from, the tendency of the falling rate of profits, artificial intelligence, what's going on there, why they're replacing human labor with machines, divisions in the ruling class, counter gangs, Bonapartism, capitalist attempts to liquidate the crisis, and explain how we move ahead and how we move toward an anti-monopoly coalition, which is what we need urgently in the United States at this time. We're looking at a color revolution in France. All right. You know, that is what we need. We need an anti-monopoly coalition. An anti-monopoly coalition is what we urgently need. That is what we need. And I advocate that, and I lay this out with a lot of facts, a long bibliography. Kim Iverson was impressed by this book. She did a whole segment with me about it. Kim Iverson loved it, and many people have read this book and been blown away by it. So if you want to understand the case for building an anti-monopoly coalition, I would recommend checking out this book. And you don't have to buy it. You can go listen because the great Tyler McConnell has read, you know, the first half of it already on his YouTube channel. He's doing an audio book of it. So you can go listen to it on Tyler McConnell's YouTube channel. Go listen to Tyler's YouTube channel. He's doing an audio book of it. And, you know, you can listen to the first half of it. And he's going to finish that up pretty soon. And there's also a reading group that's discussing it. The Center for Political Innovation reading group is discussing the book. So there you go. There you go. There you go. All righty. All righty. Next question. Privatizations are proposed in Russia, VTB Bank and others, and this could be the most dangerous fifth column in long-term war. What are your thoughts? I don't agree with that, right? In response to the disaster, you know, that's happening over there right now, Russia has asserted a lot of state control over the economy, and that happens in most countries, even capitalist, you know, imperialist countries. That happens during war, is they assert state control over the economy in order to carry out the process of war. And in Russia, there's a higher level of state control right now because they're waging a war, right? It's everything for victory. And that there are a lot of things in Russia that are private, that are heavily controlled by the state and are forced to work in the overall national interest of the country, right? And I noticed that when I was over there. You know, there's a lot of things in Russia that are technically private, but are facilitated by the government and overseen. And I don't think you're talking about some banks in Russia being privatized. It's like, I don't think that Russia is in a situation right now where they're going to privatize some banks and then they're going to become tools of the Western imperialists. They are not going to let that happen right now. That's not going to happen. I'm just telling you, with what they've been dealing with over there and the war and the economic warfare from the United States and what's been happening over there, that's not going to happen. There's no danger of that happening. There is a gap between the rich and poor in Russia, and that is a reality, right? You know, and Russians have told me about corruption being an issue in the country, something that they're struggling to address, and something that the war is forcing them to address, right? You can't wage a war with corruption, and so Russia has been cracking down on corruption during this war in order to make sure that they fight the war in the most efficient means possible. So, you know, if anything, this war is forcing Russia to become more revolutionary, more anti-imperialist. They just built a monument to Fidel Castro in Moscow. You know, they're talking about the Soviet Union and nostalgia more than ever. Unemployment in Russia is at an all-time low. Did you see that? Like basically with the war economy, they're putting everybody to work in order to fight against NATO expansion and denazification. So, you know, at this point, I don't think that there's any danger of that happening. I'm looking at what I have seen of Russia and how things are going. What I'm seeing is Russia is becoming a much more centralized society. Its economy is becoming much more controlled in order to defeat, you know, the West, in order to stabilize things, provide employment, and you know, wage a defensive war. This is a defensive war. I mean, they're fighting for their protection. This isn't an invasion. This isn't colonialism, right? This is a defensive war on Russia's part. They're fighting against, 8 years of provocations right on their border against people that are aligned with them in the region. That this is in response to this defensive war, Russia has gotten more anti-imperialist and more unified. So there you go. There you go. All right, next question. What would you say to people that think communism is idealistic, that it's impossible to produce the amount of wealth to eradicate poverty? Well, I think that this is one of the traps people fall into. And I've had this argument with Jason and Ruhe and others. And that, yes, if you're talking about the resources that exist now as we currently use them, there's certainly a danger of that, right? There's a book called The Limits to Growth that argues that, look, we're going to run out of oil in a few years, right? And yeah, if we just keep extracting oil in the same method we do now, then yeah, we would. But humanity is constantly reinventing its relationship with nature, and that defines human beings, right? Karl Marx said human beings, or Friedrich Engels said that human beings are the only species that forces the environment to serve him. Right? All the other species, they just interact with their environment. But human beings, we force the environment to serve him, ourselves, and that we reinvent our relationship with our environment. In Haiti, one of the reasons that Haiti is so impoverished is because most Haitians at this point are heating their homes with charcoal, and that requires them to chop down trees, and it's very inefficient, right? But, that's because Haiti is being kept in poverty by the imperialists. However, Haiti could, if it had a modern, could be burning natural gas for its heating systems. It could move to a much more efficient way of doing it and use different resources that are more efficient in order to accomplish the same task. We've been burning wood. Human beings have made fire. How long have, I got it. How long have human beings had fire? Right. But, you go through first we're burning fire, and then you talk about, we're burning coal, and then we start burning fossil fuels, and now we've got nuclear power, and eventually we're going to have fusion energy. The relationship between human beings and nature is constantly changing. There are minerals that were worthless decades ago, just decades ago, 30, 40 years ago, that are now very, very valuable because of computer technology and computer chips. And so this idea that we're slaves to Mother Nature, right? And that, we're going to run out of resources. It's not consistent with the nature of humanity. Yes, if we stop inventing things, if all human creativity and all human invention just ended and we just continued interacting with our environment the way we do now, we would run out of such resources. And if we only stayed on this planet, we would do such things. But there have been New York Times articles about mining asteroids and going to other planets, and we use resources differently. So if you talk about how we use resources differently, and if you talk about the possibility of getting resources from other planets, et cetera, I don't think there's any danger of this happening. So there you go. All right. Some people think that you're a hypocrite because you once ate at fast food and you use YouTube music. It's like we think communists should just live on wood cabins. Well, that's one of the most absurd things. These people don't understand anything, right? People think that communism is just a glorification of poverty, right? That we're against wealth, that capitalism is wealth. Capitalism is wealth, and we're against capitalism, so we're against wealth. And then you're a hypocrite if you're a communist, if you own a nice pair of shoes, or you spend a lot of money on going on a vacation or something. And those folks don't understand what Marxism and communism is really arguing. Marxism says that the problem with capitalism is that it is irrational, and the way wealth is produced is not rational, and that it holds back human potential and growth. And the idea of communism is that we could have a centrally planned economy. We could organize the means of production to work in the interests of all of society. And by doing so, overcome the irrationality of capitalism and produce far more wealth and make society wealthier. And, if anything, things like McDonald's and fast food and, YouTube music, these things are very communist in a way, right? They're operated for profit, but they're highly centralized, right? YouTube is a highly centralized part of Google, right? McDonald's is a highly centralized corporation. It's highly centralized and planned. It's just planned to make profits for the shareholders. But it's proof that this argument that libertarians make, it's called the economic calculation fallacy, right? Oh, no one could ever calculate, right? Economic calculation is the reason that you can't have communism, right? No one could possibly plan all the details of this economy. Well, it's bunk. Amazon calculates very effectively. It centrally plans with computer algorithms, all kinds of stuff. It knows exactly how to send things to stores, how to get things done. Walmart is a highly effective, centrally planned operation. Google, all these big corporations, they carry out central planning very efficiently to maximize the amount of profits for their shareholders. It's central planning, it's economic calculation, but in order to make profit for the owner. We want to change the nature of that and have central planning on behalf of the population. That's what we want. Is we want central planning and economic efficiency to give a better life to the people. But the libertarian argument that no one can ever centrally plan things, that's bunk, right? You can't, there's no one at the top who could possibly plan how many people go to this store and how many goods get delivered here. Look how complicated that is, right? That's the libertarian argument. And it's bunk because Amazon already does that. Amazon is bigger than the overwhelming majority of countries in the world. So is Walmart, right? And yet they very effectively, with computers and all of that, centrally plan and coordinate their activities. And they get things from point A to point B. They get the goods to the stores. They get the money to the bank. I mean, they pay their employees. They do it all, right? And that this economic calculation fallacy that a lot of libertarians throw out there is a bunk argument, and that that we want to maximize wealth. This argument that you're pointing to, it's very similar to one that I've heard over and over again, right? And every right-wing libertarian wise guy says, "Oh, you have an iPhone. The iPhone is proof that capitalism is the best thing ever." Well, the first mobile phone was patented in the Soviet Union in 1957 by Leonid Kaprianovich, and LED lights were invented in the Soviet Union. And at this point, the best mobile phones are being made by Huawei Technologies, which is a state-controlled mega corporation in China, which was set up by the Communist Party. So this argument that somehow iPhones prove that capitalism is the best system. I mean, the first mobile phone came from the Soviet Union. If your phone has a GPS in it, who invented satellites? The first satellite was Sputnik, launched by the Soviet Union. I mean, it's a bunk argument. Right. And then also that somehow you shouldn't have an iPhone because that's wealth or that's a creation of capitalism. These people don't. And you have to learn to be patient with some of the kinds of the people who make these arguments because they just don't understand. They don't know what you believe. Right. And that's why it's really important that we don't sound like the synthetic left, because most working class people have encountered the synthetic left, the woke crowd, and they think that's what communism and socialism is. If we sound like that, they're not going to give us the time of day. We need to learn to patiently explain these ideas to the working class, to our class, and help them to understand what the issue is. That is our job, I would argue. Right? We need to learn the art of patiently explaining the nature of the capitalist crisis, what we advocate, what our solution is, putting forward a program like our 4-point plan. We need to learn the art of doing that and explaining that it is a struggle for society to control the means of production, that we need a government of action to fight for working families. That's what we need to explain. That's what we need to explain. And so there you go. And that's why the Center for Political Innovation exists. We exist to explain these things. So there you go. Are we looking at a color revolution in France? I wouldn't call it a color revolution. I would say that Macron is incompetent, and that French society, the problems of unemployment and economic, not really unemployment, but underemployment have been getting worse. The population is angry at the status quo, and Macron, he represents the mainstream of French politics. Excuse me, it's getting late, and he's unable to rectify the situation. He's unable to resolve it, and that this crisis could very well lead to him leaving office, and that would be because even the majority of his own class says this guy is incompetent. I mean, things have not gotten better in France. I mean, he's been presiding over things getting worse and worse and worse, and his arm is being twisted. He's going along with the anti-Russia stuff, but he's not going along with the anti-China stuff because it's bad for France economically, and France is already suffering. His country's in chaos, and that he's an incompetent leader. He's an absolutely incompetent leader. There's no question about it. And the French people are angry and suffering, and the migrant communities have suffered. And it may be that that the ruling class of France has decided they want to replace him with someone who can get the job done better. I think there's a very good chance that that's the case. Wouldn't exactly call it a color revolution, but it could be that this is the end. This is the end of Macron. We'll see, though. We'll see. All right. Thoughts on the Russian-Georgian war and the Chechnya war. Okay, well, let's start with the Russia-Georgia war, right? 2008, I remember it was all over American media. Oh, my God, Russia invaded Georgia. It was the same way they're talking about Ukraine right now. It was just, oh, Putin was having a bad day and they invaded Georgia. Well, what actually happened? South Ossetia, which is a territory that is broken away from Georgia, that Russia protects, it doesn't consider itself to be part of Georgia. South Ossetia was attacked, and Russia has a military agreement with South Ossetia that they will protect them. So the Georgian government attacked South Ossetia, just attacked them. And so Russia had to retaliate and protect its allies in South Ossetia. So it was actually started. I mean, the war, the first shot was fired. The attack was carried out by the U.S.-backed government of Georgia. And Russia then moved in to protect South Ossetia. That's what actually happened. But you could not say this at the time. On mainstream American media, you couldn't say this. And in fact, let me see if I can pull it up here. It'd be really neat. Dennis Kucinich, I remember he said it on TV, and I'll just show you the clip if I can. I can find this. It was wild. At the Democrat National Convention in 2008, Bill O'Reilly interviewed Dennis Kucinich, and Dennis Kucinich said this on TV, and it was like a faux pas. It was very, very weird. And let me see if I can find, the Dennis Kucinich interview from Fox in 2008, because it was really, really wild. I remember it, and it was, it was very, very wild. Let me see if I can find it. Right. Because I'll show you how they responded to it. All righty. Let's see if I can find it here for you, because it was really something to see how that was just, you weren't allowed to say that. And this I've been referencing this interview a lot lately. I don't know why. But it's been coming up a lot. A lot of people have asked me about this, and I think it's just a great example of how media is rigged. If I can just find it here, let me see if I can find the clip. Maybe they've taken it down from YouTube, but Dennis Kucinich. Dennis Kucinich was the congressman from Bill O'Reilly. I can mention. Let me pull this interview up. Right. Let me pull this interview up. Let me see if I can find it, because it was really telling, because Dennis Kucinich, he said on national TV who actually started the war, and the response of Bill O'Reilly was to just laugh at him. That was all he could do, was just laugh. And if I can find that interview, I cannot find it for the life of me. Bill O'Reilly interviewing Dennis Kucinich, 2008, right? Can I find that interview? Yeah, where is it? That is so weird. I cannot find it. I remember it very, very well, but I cannot find this interview. But anyhow, I'm looking to play that interview, because it would be good to play it on here just to show it. But right, Dennis Kucinich, DNC, Bill Fox, Bill O'Reilly. Yeah, I cannot find that interview. That is so bizarre. All right, well, maybe someone can scour the web and find it. But yeah, it seems to be not findable. The YouTube search algorithm, they have completely messed it up. completely messed up the search algorithm. It's very hard to find things on YouTube now. It's like YouTube, they want to show you what they want you to see. They don't want to show you what you actually searched for, and it's very frustrating. I wish I could find that interview, because the way Bill O'Reilly responded to Dennis Kucinich pointing out how that war got started was just classic. I mean, it was just absolutely classic. And but Dennis Kucinich said that South Ossetia was attacked and that Georgia started it, and then Bill O'Reilly just kind of laughed nervously, because you can't acknowledge these things. But then the other question is about, what about the Chechnya war? Well, Chechnya is a region in the former Soviet Union, in the Russian Federation, that is historically quite Muslim. And during the Second World War, the Nazis funded a Chechen Islamic insurgency against the Soviet government. And throughout, the 1950s, there were uprisings, there were armed uprisings, that were backed by the CIA in the United States against the Soviet Union. And immediately after the fall of the USSR, there was continued funding by Saudi Arabia and the US government of Chechen separatists, and that happened, right? And the Chechen War is largely, it's largely, the United States trying to break up Russia. And one vehicle that they've discovered for doing that has been the funding of Islamic separatists in Chechnya. There you go. I mean, the Tsarnaev brothers, their parents were Chechen separatists, were backed by the United States to fight against Russia and against the Soviet Union. And look, they came and they bombed the Boston Marathon, killed a whole bunch of Americans. And this policy of arming extremists around the world, whether it's in Syria, whether it's in Libya, the U.S. government gives guns and weapons and training to Islamic extremists, and then they come back to the United States and attack us. It's happened over and over and over again. Wish Dennis Kucinich would run for president, says Lisa. Well, he's advising RFK. He's backing RFK. He's an advisor to RFK's campaign, from what I understand. He used to run for president almost routinely. It's just kind of, he was the go-to like leftist candidate kind of. He was the leftist candidate that would run and then lose and then tell everybody to vote for the Democrats. And that was the role that he played. It seems like, he was trying to be mayor of Cleveland. He wasn't able to be mayor of Cleveland. They very basically gerrymandered him out of his district, which was very unfortunate, that he was able to, lose his seat. I lived in Cleveland when he was the representative of Cleveland. I was in his district and I saw how well loved he is. Even Republicans voted for him. He was just a well-loved man in that area, and his whole career and his whole history is kind of fascinating to me. But Dennis Kucinich is a great guy. I understand he's close to Marianne Williamson. She's like his spiritual advisor or something, and that there were receptions at his house that Marianne Williamson would be at. Marianne Williamson perplexes me. She's one of these like weird, like mystical occultist gurus. She promotes a book called A Course in Miracles. And I almost see a continuity between some of her rhetoric and the Aquarian conspiracy of Marilyn Ferguson. Shout out to Noah of the Center for Political Innovation, Boston. He confronted Marianne Williamson, got her to talk about Uhuru. I thought that was really, really great. And but yeah, I see Marianne Williamson. She's one of these like kind of mystical occult gurus, and she was Oprah's spiritual advisor, and then Oprah made her famous. And she advises a lot of wealthy people and gives them, mystical, occult, readings and stuff like that. That's just kind of what she is. She's a spiritual advisor. She writes books about, weight loss, etc. And that, this has always been a thing. The liberal CIA loves this kind of stuff, and I talk a lot about Marilyn Ferguson, who wrote this book, The Aquarian Conspiracy. She was one of these occultist gurus, and she was the spiritual advisor to Al Gore. And she also, her book, The Aquarian Conspiracy, has, it basically openly endorses the Stanford Research Institute, which is where the CIA was like paying for these weird occult, Operation Jedi experiments, and that Silicon Valley, their ideology is very much tied in with what you'll read in The Aquarian Conspiracy by Marilyn Ferguson. And that's kind of the synthetic left, and the foundations of Silicon Valley are kind of laid on top of some of that occultism of Marilyn Ferguson. All right, folks. Well, those are all the super chats, and it's getting late. So I'll probably be back soon. Might be tomorrow night. I'm gonna do probably a patrons only stream next, just because it was the end of the month, and I always do one per month for Patreon folks. So I'm gonna do a patrons only stream for Patreon folks, and then I'll probably be back soon to do yet another stream. Yeah. Quick reminder that we're having an event coming up. We're having basically a day of action in New York City. Just a quick reminder that we're doing a protest July 10th, Monday, July 10th. Peace with Russia, peace with China, no police state. That's in New York City on July 10th. And then afterwards, that evening, we'll be having an event, Money and American Injustice, with guest speakers, including attorneys and others. That'll be great. We could use your support. If you'd like to send us a donation to help these events happen, to make them go more smoothly, and make sure the budget comes through and that everything is in a good spot, by all means, send us a donation. You can send us a donation at this link. It goes directly to CPI. We're doing that. So there you go. I just wanted to remind you all of that, and I'll be back soon. I'm always doing live streams. So I'm going to pull up the closing music, and I think that'll be our show for tonight. So let me find the closing music. Here we go.
In the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Good night.